So this is the Front Porch podcast, and I'm Jessica Alarcon, and I'm here today with Genelle Smith, who is the Executive Director of Wellspring Women's Center.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, Thank you so much. I'm so glad we connected and were able to make this happen. So just to get started, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? And I know you are a social worker by education and background, so what brought you into social work?
So I've been a social worker since like the third grade, really. I would say that, probably earlier than that. Maybe I was born a social worker, but I was always the person who really cared about other people. And I wanted to help them, and I was always really concerned. I mean, even in kindergarten, there was this student who would have temper tantrums, and they would always make him leave the classroom. I was always really worried about him. I always wanted to go find out like how we could help him. And I'm very concerned about the students around me, the people around me. I used to have support groups for other kids. We would sit on top of these, I think they're totally outlawed now. They were these monkey bars that looked like spaceships. And we'd sit on the top, and we would say our problems, and then we'd hang upside down. Because, it made everything better. So I cared about people, and I always had a lot of mercy and empathy. I think one of my spiritual gifts is mercy. I just generally don't want people to suffer, and I want to try to figure out how to alleviate it. And my earliest memories are of that. And so when I found out about social work, I was like, of course I'm a social worker. I've always been a social worker, because that's what social work is about, right? It's about service. It's about the dignity and worth of a person. It's about social justice. It's about this idea that, every human being matters, and that there's something important that happens between people that creates remarkable healing and opportunity for growth, right? So there's just something so special about that. And so that's kind of how it happened. I think I am a social worker. It's who I am. And when I found the profession, it was like total alignment. All just happened perfect. And so, so now I've been a social worker in Sacramento for, well over 20 years now. I actually teach social work part-time in the Division of Social Work at Sac State. And, of course, I get the opportunity to be here at Wellspring, which was founded by social workers and also sisters of social service. So it's kind of this great energy that's kind of all come together for me.
So what brought you here to Wellspring? How did you end up at this organization?
So I would say that it's however you would answer the question with whatever God means to you. That's what brought me to Wellspring. This greater energy. At the time, 2009, if you can remember, was quite a crisis, a financial crisis, economic crisis. A lot was happening in this community. None of the houses that you see across the street existed like they do now. It's very different, right? And I had always known about Wellspring. I was a donor here, a supporter here. I loved the mission, the kind of open door policy. And I was in a point where I was working in a state job. I was pretty comfortable as a social worker in the state job. I was working with individuals that had cognitive impairments and other types of disorders. And I was really called to get back to community. Like I was feeling a lack of that in this state work that I was doing. And so someone mentioned to me, hey, did you know social work, that's your calling and you love doing it. So maybe you should just do it somewhere else. And I was like, well, but where? And it's the middle of an economic crisis and everybody's unemployed. Then a colleague of mine said, but you love Wellspring. I think they're hiring for a social worker. It's like, Wellspring is hiring. Well, holy cow, let me get there right away. So I connected with the executive director here, and she was like, we're not going to pay what the state pays. Yeah, she was like, I was like, I figured. And I go, but that's okay, because it's not about the money for me. It's really about, am I doing something I love? And so I met with Sister Judy, who was the executive director at the time. We chatted at her house, which is where the interview took place, which you can imagine is kind of funny in itself.
Interesting.
Yes. And we just talked about Wellspring. We talked about its mission. We talked about what we love about people. And I left her house knowing that I was going to come here and that this was going to be my new professional home. And it was that immediately. I mean, you walk through the doors here, I get so much comfort here. And just the mission, this idea that you're serving with no conditions, no barriers, and you're not asking anybody to change. That's such a key piece.
And so can you tell me a little bit about the organization, the history, and this really interesting building that we're...
Where to start with that? So Wellspring was founded by two sisters of social service, Sister Claire Graham and Sister Catherine O'Connell. They were sisters of social service. They were employed as social workers. They were also social workers, and they were walking downtown, and they encountered somebody who needed food. So they took them to a little fast food restaurant, and they were, just talking with the individual. And a little bit into the conversation, they realized the individual was a woman. They hadn't known quite at first that it was a woman. They just, really obscured by lots of clothing and other things. And so then they realized and heard about the experience of an unhomed woman, right, which was sort of an unknown experience at that time. You knew more about the male experience. This was the early 80s. So that really impacted them, and they both really wanted to do something about it, but they didn't know what. They were just like, what could we do? We should have a place for women. They sort of held this dream in their heart, and years went by. And finally, Sister Catherine called Sister Claire and said, if we don't do something, we're never going to do it. So they just, without really any plan at all, rented a little storefront over on Broadway, opened the doors with a Mr. Coffee Maker and a box of donuts, no business plan, no license, nothing really, and just started inviting women in. And they came and shared their experiences and their heart. And it was great because about a year and one day after they opened, Jean, who was the woman that they encountered downtown, actually came into the center. And they were able to tell her that they had been inspired by her and share the story of Wellspring. And she stayed and was a part of Wellspring until she died, until she passed away. And I always love what Sister Claire said about Jean. She said, Jean wasn't wonderful and she wasn't perfect, but she loved Wellspring and we loved her. That's Wellspring. There are no wonderful, perfect people. There's just people, and we love each other. And that matters. It makes a difference in people's lives. So that's Wellspring. That's really what we're about. And obviously have grown out of that little storefront on Broadway. We were able to get this wonderful firehouse historic building here in Oak Park. We own the building. We got it on a redevelopment loan, finally paid it off like 6 or 7 years ago. So it's ours. And it's a beautiful space, of course, just the history here. We've had many of the firemen come in and just asked to be in the space and tell us about the story of what it was like before. A lot of our guests even remember it as a firehouse. So they'll tell, and at one point, I guess in this community, the firehouse was a place where you brought your bike to get licensed, so that if it was stolen, you would be able to get it found. So a lot of people have memories of coming here as a child with their bike and having the fireman kind of like imprint some numbers or something on the bike. And so we get stories of that. But in the community, this building's just been here, and it's been a part of what we do as, community. And I love that, right, from not only just being an old firehouse, but now being a place of gathering and refuge for women and children. Yeah.
Thank you. Wow, that's such a beautiful story.
I know. I love that story. And so the interesting thing about both Sister Claire and Sister Catherine is that they both had such different energies. Like Sister Catherine was very practical and always had very organized and together. And Sister Claire was more of a dreamer. So they just sort of balanced each other so well. But of course, that's Sister Claire on the wall there. And she always said, no matter the question, no matter what is asked of you, the answer is always love. So it's our little motto around here.
Well, that's a good one.
Yeah, we think so.
So what does a typical day look like here at the center?
There's no typical day. There's a unique day every day. There's some things that might seem usual, like we open the door at the same time.
Okay.
That's kind of what we do. But then you never know, because we're inviting the community. There's no conditions.
Yeah.
We're just saying come in. So we don't know what comes in that day. We never know. It could be joy, could be pain, could be violence, Could be just tons of laughter. Could be all of the above. Could be confusion, despair. But that just is what community is, right? It's about no day being the same. And I think the joy in that is that we get to be present for it all and witness it and experience it and hold it. So I guess a typical day would be us bearing witness and participating and loving and laughing and crying. Yeah. So I guess a typical day is that. Those are what you could typically experience. But what the content is very different based on the pain that someone might be experiencing, or like I said, the joy, because that's community. It's both. And that's life.
Yeah.
It's both.
Yeah. There's not really a difference between where people are at with respect to that.
No.
Regardless of how much they have or what they need.
Yeah, you'll find sometimes actually the people give more to me than I give to them, right? So that's the other thing that's a reality, is that our guests and this community has many gifts that they offer. And I receive that just as much as I give back to it. So there's a reciprocity, I guess, to that relationship with the community that Wellspring has always had.
Got it.
And makes it really beautiful.
So the services you offer here include meals and a children's program. Can you describe kind of how that works, what that looks like?
Sure, yes. So the programs that we offer include the main program that most people think of as the meal program, which is a morning program that runs, from 8:30 to 11:30 right now during COVID. And it is just an open door. Any woman or child walks through the door for a meal. And the meal just is the space, right? It's the reason. But then once you're in the doors, there's lots of other things to happen. First of all, is that even though that meal will be free and you won't be asked any questions and it will be a high quality, nutritious meal, we never want anyone to feel poor. So we want you to feel rich, which is why, we have tablecloths and flowers, and everything here should feel like you're being treated as a guest, as a very special and honorable guest. And that feeling, I think, of acknowledgement is what most of the women come through the doors for are really hungry for. The food is important, but without the how we do it, it wouldn't be the same. It's about the acknowledgement, and it's kind of like if you remember the old TV show, where they'd walk in the door and everybody would know their name. That's what it's like here, right? Like
cheers.
Yeah, that's right. So it's like, oh, hi, and everybody screams out their name. It's like there's a sense of like you're known, and of course it's this community. It's Oak Park, right? That's who's coming through the doors, and there's a deep sense of, I think, belonging that happens there. And that is really what's happening in that meal program. Yes, you're getting fed, you're getting, a really high quality meal, but you're also getting your soul fed a little bit, right? Your deeper heart fed. And that's what really happens and what's most important. And that's what, when we say hospitality with dignity and love, dignity and love, right, is the key part of that. And so then from there, we have the Women's Wellness Program, which includes, all sorts of case management services, counseling services. It includes a whole art program, including art therapy, an intensive art therapy program. And, all of that happens is in relation to wellness, right? How do we create wellness? And that might mean that we can't help you get out of poverty.
Yeah.
Because there are systemic barriers to that beyond most individuals, right? There's deeper things. But how can you live as well as possible, as rich as possible in the circumstances you're in? So that becomes the sort of foundation for that whole program. And then the safety net program that is offered through that, which is like bus tickets and diapers and hygiene items and just a whole assortment of other things that might be needed on any given day. And then the children's program is a program for, the children to just get some structured, supervised play and love, same kind of thing. And also to give caregivers a break. They need maybe a minute to sit down and not have mommy, right? So
absolutely,
a moment of that. And I've noticed over the years that, I've watched kids grow up here and, they come back and tell me about their experiences here. And sometimes it's actually the kids that get the moms or caregivers to Wellspring, right? They'll be like, I want to go to Wellspring today. And that's a good thing because so often I think moms and caregivers feel so isolated and alone. So they have a place to come and connect. And
no, especially if they don't have an excess of resources.
Yes.
I mean, it's hard enough with resources.
And what I find is that a lot of times the support systems are really taxed, and so this is just another place to get support, another place to lean, another place to say, I'm really concerned because my daughter's not talking, or, every concern a parent has, right? That you just don't know what's going on. And so that's one of the great things about Wellspring is we have lots of volunteers that come in and many expert volunteers. We partnered with the UC Davis Mind Institute and different places that are really offering quality evaluation and support for women who may not actually access that easily on their own. And so just bringing it to them, bringing those services to them and, helping the developing child. The kids here are just lights. They're so bright, as all kids are. They just come with this energy and enthusiasm for life, and you just want to nurture it and support the parents to see that light too, even when they're just struggling and suffering themselves in hard times. Yeah.
Thank you. So how has the last year affected what you're doing here with the community?
So, boy, the last year has been like a big pivot, right?
Yeah,
For everybody.
Well, it just seems like because most of what you do involves, yes, you could still give out food, but it's not, really the way that you're doing it seems to be the most important part of what you're doing here. And that just was, I can only imagine, impaired.
So I remember the day in March of 2020 when I made the announcement to this collective community dining environment that we would be going into quarantine and that, what that meant and, isolating at home. And many of folks here, of course, don't have a home to isolate to. And but that we would still be open, right? So we didn't close a single day. We opened, but with modification. And there was, at that time, nobody telling me anything about what that would look like, right? I was asking everybody. It turned out, most of us safety net service directors kind of got together and we were like, well, what are you going to do? And what are you going to do? And we were just kind of powwowing about it, right? It's like, what is this all going to mean? And we all, I think what was amazing about that is that there's such strong nonprofits in Sacramento, and every director I talked to was committed to continuing to serve the community. And so we did. We opened the door. We had no idea what we were doing. We were like, well, let's serve some to-go food. It's just, it was just a make it up as you go. But we knew we wanted to be here. And during those early days, I think that was when it was so clear how important it was, because we had a lot of unhomed individuals coming from really far away, just trying to find water or a bathroom. Every place was closed. And they were and they turned off the water fountains in the park. And they couldn't find water, and it was just such a real experience for them. And so we quickly realized that we also needed during that time to serve men, because we had a ton of men who were desperate. So we just opened the doors for men too at that time. We're like, well, what do we need to do to serve the community? Because clearly there's a huge need. And so we allowed men to come in, and we were just doing our best. And along the way, you kind of get your feet under you and you're like, okay, what's the next thing to do? What's the next thing to do? And so we had this horrible kind of like basically down to the dirt parking lot behind our building, which is almost the same footprint as our building, so it's big.
Yeah.
But I couldn't do anything out there safely. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to need to get this paved. So how do I do that, right? So that we can actually dine out there or do something out there. So that became the next thing, is getting the money and getting the funds to get that paved, which is a big deal for us, because one of the things that's important to know about Wellspring is that we don't receive any government money here. So everything you see happens because of the goodwill of people and the generosity of people. And that's real, right? So it means like that person who writes that $5 check a month, it matters here. We do this on a shoestring. And so when you're trying to get $40,000 together to repave a parking lot, it wasn't so easy. So, but we did. You know, we had, a great board. We have great board stewardship here, and we worked really hard. And sure enough, we got it paved. So we did. So then our community dining just started outside, and that was such a relief to just have the opportunity to have the space for people, and for people who are unhomed to be able to sit down and eat at a table. It's so important. Just little issues of dignity that are hard to understand if you have them. And so that became a big pivot for us. Outside dining. And that was in it of itself, I think the most challenge that we felt was during really stormy days when we still were told not to let people inside. It was just weird, right? We were just but then thinking, but what is the risk, you know, for our population that is so vulnerable? It was tough. And we cried a lot about the conditions and just did what we could to make it better. And that was it. Yeah, so we just kept going. We just figured out how to do everything within the parameters that were offered, and outside whatever we could do in terms of the social work that we're still doing. We pivoted some stuff to Zoom, though, of course, with our population, that's not realistic, and their access is very limited. They're coming to us to get on Zoom court because they have no idea how to do it. And, you know, so all these little things, the technology things. So, but yeah, so it was one big pivot. It was a huge pivot, but it was all with love. It was all still with our mission. It was all with still being able to be a face that can acknowledge you. And I started to be, that was the other thing, because not only can I not hug you, but now my face is covered, so you can't even see my face, that I'm trying to acknowledge you and experience, you know, and just offer recognition. And so I noticed I was exaggerating all my movements. I don't know if you noticed this at all, but I'd be like, big movements of everything. Like I tried to like my eyes, trying to speak out my eyes to just sort of to
compensate.
Yes, in this big way. I was like, I feel like I'm a walking emoji. I'm just like big, and people would comment on it, like, or I would like just gestures were like so big for me, and I'm noticing now as I'm taking my mask off, I'm like, oh, I don't have to be so exaggerated. I can like calm it down. I hope I'm not exaggerating now. I might be. I'm so used to doing it.
It doesn't appear obvious anymore.
So yes, that's what we did. We pivoted, we changed, we still served the community. We served them in different ways, but I think with the same heart, with the same mission. And, you know, and even now as we continue to pivot, and that was one of the, you know, I think one of a joyous day, of course, was when the City Church offered their vaccination clinic to the community. That was huge. And we celebrated, and I don't know, it was just a sweet day. That first time that some of our guests finally had access, because it hadn't been happening. So it was good.
So moving forward, what do you think the community needs most right now? The community that you serve and the neighborhood?
So need is an interesting word. I'm always cautious with it.
Okay.
Because I think need can be misconstrued. Sometimes, you know, it's an interesting one. So
absolutely.
And often I feel like I who am I to speak for so many people and what their needs are? I know that the community is changing, and I know that a lot of people are left behind in that. And I think just like any community, there's the hardship that it's going through because of that and the changes that are happening. I think the community, and when I look at Oak Park, I think there needs to be a place for its history, for what it is and what it's been to stay and be. That's my personal opinion about its beauty. And for the women and children I serve, it's love. Love is what is needed beyond anything else. And when love is given, it's hard to imagine someone not being sheltered, right? If you love somebody, you want to see them sheltered. You want to see their basic needs met. So I think it's about loving each other and seeing and talking and being present for another person in a way that lets you hear and understand versus see and decide.
So maybe we need to hear each other a little more.
Yeah, I think I've spent a lot of time talking about in my social work career. I train other social workers.
Yeah.
So I talk about listening all the time, right? That's what I say. That's the main task of our profession. And it is a verb. It's something you actively do. And it's exhausting if you do it right. But it's always what makes the difference between a connection and a missed opportunity. And so listening is so vital. And being curious, right? Interested, asking questions, wondering, just diving into these conversations where you walk away going, wow, like that person's beautiful. Because everybody is. Ultimately, that's what I found. Everyone you talk to. So just takes the ears to hear it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really appreciating this conversation, and you've given me a lot to think about. I really love the way your approach to people and serving them and inviting them to be here with you.
Thank you. And it's really, the great thing about that is that this place existed. I just happened to show up here, and it was just so in alignment with my values. I was like, wow, how special. Thank you, God. Like, it's amazing, right? So.
You're fortunate.
So I was fortunate.
Getting a brief period. Is there anything else you would like the Oak Park community to know about yourself, Wellspring, or your community here, people?
I think the most important thing that I've learned about being, and being a part of this community is that it's such a welcoming community. And I've always felt welcomed here, and it's the only place I've actually felt like I've been in community. And I'll walk down the street, people really do know you, and they'll stop in the middle of the street and call you over to their car to talk. That's like the Oak Park conversations that happen all over. And and that's a real experience of welcome, of belonging, and this community is so welcoming. I think that's important to know.
And thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I'm so glad we got together to have it.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it as well.